It gives me great pleasure today to welcome our audience members to listen to our first speaker, our keynote speaker for today. We are very honored to have Dr. Sailesh Rao with us from Climate Healers. Dr. Sailesh Rao is the founder and executive director of Climate Healers, a nonprofit dedicated towards healing the Earth's climate. He is an environmentalist by occupation and systems engineer by profession. He invented the protocol for transforming early analog internet connections to more robust digital connections. So here we are connected digitally. Thank you for that, Dr. Rao, while accelerating their speed tenfold. Still today, any data accessed on the internet likely passed through a device implementing this protocol. He's also a human, earth, and animal liberation activist, husband, dad, and since 2010, a star-struck grandfather. He has promised his granddaughter, Kimaya, that the world will be largely vegan before she turns 16 in 2026, so that people will stop eating her relatives, the animals. He has faith that humanity will transform to keep this pinky promise to Kimaya's generation, not just for ethical reasons, but also out of sheer ecological necessity. He has been championing the vegan rewilding solution to our global environmental, health, and ethical crises since 2009. It gives me great pleasure to turn the floor over to today's keynote speaker, Dr. Sailesh Rao. Welcome, Dr. Rao.
Thank you so much, Christopher. And thank you so much, everyone, for this opportunity. I thought I would speak to you straight from the heart as opposed to using slides, because this is such a varied topic, and bringing compassion to reverse climate change seems to be so out of the box compared to what everyone else is talking about. So people are talking about reducing fossil fuel infrastructure. So let me begin by giving you a brief overview of how I got to this position. Why am I working on this? And what prompted me to look into this aspect of climate change. I'm a systems engineer by profession, as Christopher said, and I used to work on the internet back in the 90s. And when I started working on the internet was fairly slow, and people were having trouble getting 100 megabit Ethernet to work. So it was connecting devices at 100 million bits per second. Seems like a lot, but there was already, a lot of traffic blockages happening in the internet, and people were looking to increase the speeds, but they were having trouble getting 100 megabit to work. So they asked me to take a look at it. They said, "You're a systems engineer. Can you tell us what we are doing wrong?" And I took a look at it, and I went to the next meeting saying, "I think we can do 1,000 megabits per second on this. Easy. But you have to go from analog to digital. So you have to convert it." And people basically laughed at me. They said, "You're crazy. We cannot even get 100 to work, and you're talking about doing 1,000, especially with this newfangled stuff we are talking about, digital signal processing. You never heard of it." So they just said, "We'll believe it when we see it, but you go off and play on your own over there." So that's how it started. And this was in 1996. By the end of 1996, they realized that what I'm saying was serious, because there were a lot of people coming to our meetings saying, "Hey, seems to make sense. So let's look at it." And by 1999, it became a standard. And by 2003, it was on every motherboard at Intel. And the first year, I think Intel sold about 150 million units. And the internet just took off. The internet became a huge thing because now it had a very robust infrastructure. Now, after doing that, I quit Intel, and I was still attending the same standards meetings. And now they were talking about doing the same thing 10 times faster, 10 gigabit Ethernet. So I remember going to the meeting, and this new startup, this new engineer that I had never met before, was there saying we can do the same thing even 10 times faster. And the people who had told me I was crazy, I'll believe it when we see it, were egging him on, saying, of course it can be done. And I asked him, I said, Howard, I mean, this is not cookies, you cannot just go from 1 to 10 so easily. And why are you supporting it when you told me it couldn't be done? And he said, maybe he knows something that you don't know. See, when you said this, we didn't believe you, but you proved us wrong. So now I'm going to give him a chance. I said, okay, let's proceed. Let's figure out whether it can be done or not. And the more I attended the meetings, the more I realized that this is a difficult problem and we were not even approaching it properly. So I was doing back of the envelope calculations saying it, and my data was saying it cannot be done. So I went to one of the people who was saying it can be done, and I asked him, so why are you saying this? Why are you saying, don't you see this data? And he said, there's $100 million being invested in 10 gigabit Ethernet. I'm getting a decent salary, so just leave me alone. So the intention was not really to solve 10 gigabit Ethernet. It was to basically survive in the world where people were putting money to make it happen. And then the rest of us are saying, okay, I'm getting money, so why don't I pretend it can be done? So I voted against the standard, and I was getting frustrated with the entire standards process. I said, this is not going to work, folks. And people were saying, you step away, let us work on it. So I came home one day, sat down in front of the TV, and I turned on the TV, and there was Vice President Al Gore talking about climate change. He was calling it global warming at that time. And this was in 2005, December. And I was rooted to my seat. I couldn't move because I realized that this is a much, much bigger problem than what I was butting my head against, this 10 gigabit Ethernet. And if half of what he's saying was true, I felt like everybody should be working on this problem, not something else. So I told my wife that. And she said, if you think it's that important, then why don't you look into it? So that's how it started. I started looking into it. And within 3 months, I told my wife, this is much, much worse than what he's saying. So we have to close down our company and focus on this full time. And that's what we did. Okay, so we closed our company, and I wrote to Mr. Gore and I said, how can I help you? And I didn't hear from him for a few months, but then I got a letter from him saying, why don't you come and get trained by me? So I became part of the second batch that he trained on giving his presentation on global warming. So he was basically getting thousands of people. His aim was to get thousands of people. And I think right now he has over 20,000 people that he has trained to give his presentation on global warming and climate change. So I was in the second batch, and this training happened in Nashville, Tennessee, at the Hyatt Regency. So I went there, and during the training, I asked him a question. And my question was based on just back of the envelope calculations. So I was calculating that there is 30% more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than when we started in the Industrial Revolution in 1750. And that carbon dioxide was causing this heating. That's the story that we are being told. Okay, that's carbon dioxide is causing this heating, and it's mostly being emitted by fossil fuels. But the land on Earth is storing 3 times as much CO2 in the form of trees. Okay? And 1/3 of the land has been cleared of trees for grazing animals. Now, a tree stores carbon dioxide that used to be in the atmosphere. And when you clear land of trees for grazing, you're replacing trees with grass. So I was doing back of the envelope calculations saying land has 3 times as much carbon as in the entire atmosphere. The atmosphere has 30% more carbon than it needs to have. 1/3 of the trees have been cleared. 1/3 of the land has been cleared. So if we just stop using animals for food and restore the forest on the land that's currently being used for grazing animals, can we not reverse climate change? So that was the question I asked him. Can we not reverse climate change if we just restore the forest on the land we're using to graze animals? And he immediately turned to Roy Neal, his chief of staff, and he said, how did this guy get in here? And I realized that he didn't want to talk about it. Okay, so to me, this was 10 gigabit Ethernet again. People were saying something, but they were not really solving the problem. If you really wanted to solve the problem, there is a solution. That was the impression I got. Then I thought, maybe I'm wrong, maybe, because he said it's not that important. It's not as big as you think. I said, okay, maybe I'm wrong. Let me just wait and study this some more. So in 2006, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization issued a report saying that livestock production, the production of animals for food and so on, is responsible for 18% of all greenhouse gas emissions on an annual basis. So 18% is a lot, but it's not. It's not like as if it's going to reverse climate change, right? So it's a lot. But that itself caused some consternation. Then in 2009, there was a paper published by Goodland and Anhand in the World Watch Institute, and they corrected mistakes made in the UN FAO's report. And making those corrections raised the number from 18% to 52%, or 51%. Okay? And they said it's at least 51% when you count all of this. And that was more in line with the way I was seeing the data. I said, okay, now this is making sense. But then, science is always about debates, right? People are going to come up with an estimate, and the other side, I wanted the other side to respond to this because they were pointing out errors in the UN FAO's report. Meanwhile, I'm trying to persuade Al Gore and his team to start talking about animal agriculture and its impact on climate change. So I got a bunch of my colleagues to co-sign a letter with me, and we sent a letter to him saying that we need to include animal agriculture in the slide deck that we are using to talk about climate change to people. And Mr. Gore wrote back a very polite letter saying, thank you for your letter, and I'm looking into it. And please proceed with what we are doing now, because this needs to be resolved. It's not as big as you think, something to that effect. Okay? So I was happy with that. And then I waited for this new paper by Goodland and Anhand to be debated in the scientific community. And that debate happened in 2011. In 2011, the UN FAO scientists wrote a paper that got published in the Animal Feed Science and Technology Journal, claiming that the corrections made by Goodland and Anhand were not correct. And so they tried to refute it. And then the editor asked Goodland and Anhand to respond to that. So this is how scientific debates happen. And Goodland and Anhand went point by point with the refutation in the FAO scientists' paper, and they debunked it. Okay? It was actually quite obvious to anyone reading it that the FAO scientists were wrong. They debunked it point by point. And then the editor asked the FAO scientists to continue the debate. And they declined to continue the debate. So this was 2012. When they declined to continue the debate, I realized that this is now settled science. Okay, this is now settled science. As far as I'm concerned, I'm an engineer. So as an engineer, I take settled science and build solutions out of it. I'm trained to figure out how to solve problems based on settled science. So then I wrote a second letter to Mr. Gore saying that this is now becoming very serious. It is the leading cause of climate change and is not being addressed. And I got the same colleagues to co-sign the letter with me, and I sent it to him. And this time I didn't get any response. Okay? I didn't get any response, and I realized that the people don't want to talk about it. People don't want to talk about how our treatment of animals is actually causing the earth to heat up. It's the leading cause of climate change. So I basically walked out of the Climate Reality Project because I don't want to be part of a team that is deceiving the public. And what is the leading cause of climate change? Unfortunately, we are living in a system in which this is how things are done. Okay, it was at the UN climate change meetings. UN climate change meetings now have been happening for more than 3 decades. So we are now going to have the 30th Conference of the Parties at the UN in Brazil this year. And climate change is getting worse and worse and worse. So I'm not used to this. I'm an engineer who solves problems. And I want to work with people who actually want to solve the problem. See, I want to tell you another story about 2 metro projects in India. The Kolkata Metro was commissioned by Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in the 1970s. So this was the first major city in which a metro project was being implemented to help relieve the traffic congestion in the city. And from the beginning, that project was rife with corruption, bureaucratic delays, you name it. There were lawsuits and all kinds of things. And 50 years later, okay, the Kolkata Metro has exactly 2 lines that are operational. One going north-south, one going east-west. And the east-west line does not even touch the north-south line. So it has caused so much inconvenience in the city. People are used to seeing a big pile of sand or dirt and big hole in the ground and part of the metro project. And so it's a highly unpopular project. People are fed up with it, but billions of dollars have been spent on it, and it's been used to make money, right? The second project I want to talk to you about is the Delhi Metro project. That was started in 1996, and this time the politicians stayed out of it. Why? Because Delhi is the capital of India. And the politicians, the main politicians, were getting stuck in traffic jams. And they really wanted this metro project to work. So they said, okay, please implement this, and we're not going to interfere. So they gave it to this engineer called Sridharan. And Sridharan had these clear lines of authority. He was not going to tolerate any corruption in the project. Okay? So within 6 years, the first trains were running in 2002. Today, it rivals the London Underground in terms of total extent. And it carries 50% more people than the London Underground. And 99.97% of the trains arrive within 1 minute of schedule. And at peak times, trains run every 2.5 minutes. It's a model of efficiency. It has been executed under budget, okay, on time, every step of the way. How did the same bunch of engineers in the same country, how did they implement a project like Delhi Metro when they couldn't do the Kolkata Metro? And how can we now take the lessons from the Delhi Metro and apply it to what we need to do for climate change? See, the lessons of the Delhi Metro, why is it that Kolkata Metro still hasn't been able to really to change, is because of what Deborah Fries talks about in her two loop theories of change. She says big systems can never be changed from within. The only way to deal with a big issue like that is to start over and do it right. Start over and do it right. Okay? This is the two loops theory of change. And there are 4 sets of people who can make this happen. The first are the trailblazers, who look at the problem afresh, and they tell you, hey, there is another way to solve this problem. Okay, and we are going to work on that separately from whatever you guys are doing over here in the big system. Those are the trailblazers. The second are the illuminators. The illuminators are those who tell this story to the people, so that you have to gain the people's support for doing this second project. Okay? So the illuminators tell the story about this transformation and how we are going to do this. And this, again, in the Delhi Metro, Sridharan was very, very cognizant of that. He kept the public informed. He kept the public on his side. And whenever anything happened that impacted the public, he was right in front, apologizing as necessary and fixing the problem. Okay? The same thing has to happen here. The illuminators have to do that. The third set of people are the protectors. The protectors are those who have power and resources in the old system, who are going to help the new system and people working in the new system and prevent them from being crushed by the old system. And the fourth set of people who work on the new system are the hospice workers. Hospice workers are the ones who help the old system literally die off slowly and help people transition from the old to the new. So this is Deborah Fries's two-loop theory of change. And it's as if you have to work on a different planet, literally. So this is why I call it planet B, as opposed to planet A. On planet A, we say something, but we don't do it. We pretend to do it. Planet A has this 17 Sustainable Development Goals that the UN has identified, and 195 nations have signed on to these goals. They signed on to implement and meet all the goals by 2030. All 195 nations have done that. Okay? Now, this was started in 2015. It's been 10 years since the 17 Sustainable Development Goals were adopted by the United Nations. What is the progress so far? Have we met even a single goal? How many engineers are working on this? Is there a serious project within the UN to address these goals? Is my question. Because when we had to go to the moon in 1960s, NASA hired over 1 million engineers to implement the project. Engineers are those human beings who are specialized in implementing solutions, in solving problems. So my question to the UN is, how many engineers have you hired for meeting the 17 Sustainable Development Goals? Where is this project? Are we seriously trying to solve this problem for the children of the world? Okay? We have to get serious. And this is why I wrote a book called There is a Planet B. There is a planet B, a planet in which people are doing what they say. There are people who are actually working on solving the problem. And it's now for all of us who are working on solving the problem to come together and to do it together. And religion happens to be at the core of it. Let me tell you why religion is at the core of it. At the Durban meeting of the UN in 2011, it was COP17, a lot of religious leaders had come together saying, hey, we need to come together and help solve climate change. Help our government solve climate change, right? That was the way they were framing it. So there was an interfaith declaration on climate change that everyone signed on to during that meeting. And the Interfaith Declaration on Climate Change had an addendum called the Durban Addendum that we added. And in the Durban Addendum, basically said, well, climate change is a symptom, the fever that our Earth has contracted. The underlying disease is the disconnection from creation that plagues human societies throughout the Earth. And we, the undersigned, pledge to heal this disconnection by promoting and exemplifying compassion for all creation in all our actions. In all our actions. And every religious leader that was there signed it. And they all said it's foundational to our religion. Compassion for all creation is foundational to our religion. So all the major religions were represented, all the minor religions were represented, even atheists signed it, right? Those who don't even have a religious path but are spiritual, they signed it. Then I got a call from the office of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, because I was the one who authored this addendum and I put it together. So I got a call from Archbishop Desmond Tutu's office. He's saying, Desmond has a question for you. I said, okay, what is his question? He says, he signed the addendum, and the addendum says compassion for all creation in all our actions. Does that mean that Desmond has signed on to go vegan? Because he loves his chicken too much. And I said, it's up to him to interpret what he just signed, not to me to tell him what to do. I mean, this is a Nobel laureate, right? He needs to know what he's doing. And guess what? Archbishop Desmond Tutu went vegan before he died. So he was someone who realized that his actions need to match his words. If our actions match our words, we would all be vegan. And if you're all vegan, that would release 40% of the land back to nature, and nature can start healing. We have cut half the trees on the planet over the last 10,000 years as a species. If we restore those 3 trillion trees that we cut, there will be no climate change. It's over. It'll be reversed. That's what our numbers are showing. That's what the data is telling us. But that's not what is being implemented at the moment, because it is being used to make money for people. The richest man in the world sells electric cars. So we have to keep pretending that fossil fuel burning is the leading cause of climate change in order for this story to be told. The story that you're being told is a story of green growth. Okay, so I have analyzed this systematically, and I've written it in my book, There is a Planet B, in which I say, on planet A, there are 4 foundational myths. And these 4 foundational myths are what's driving planet A. Okay? The first myth is protein is only found in animal foods. A myth is a lie wrapped in a truth. It is true that protein is found in animal foods. In fact, that's what they keep telling us in our science textbooks. Protein is found in animal foods. What they omitted to tell us is that protein is also found in all plant foods. In fact, all plant foods have all amino acids. All plant foods have complete protein. It is a myth that plant foods have incomplete protein. How do we know this? We measured it in the lab. You can go do it yourself. You can, and it also is common sense. How is the elephant getting so big eating just leaves and grass? So we know, okay, fundamentally we know that protein is found in all plant foods. And yet we think that protein is only found in animal foods. And that only came about because we keep repeating to children, protein and meat, protein and meat. And children begin to think that protein is only found in meat. So this is a deliberate deception of little children that's happening in schools. So that's the first foundational myth. Protein is only found in animal foods. And the corresponding foundational truth on planet B is that all plant foods contain protein and are complete protein. The second foundational myth on planet A is calcium is only found in dairy foods. And this is also accomplished by telling children calcium is found in milk. Calcium is found in milk. And children begin to think that calcium is only found in milk because these science teachers are telling them calcium is found in milk. And this is how we create the second myth. Calcium is only found in dairy foods. And the corresponding truth on planet B is that if you eat enough calories, you will get enough calcium. Calcium is found in all plant foods as well, in varying amounts. Okay? So it's not like there is a plant food that has zero calcium. That's a little bit of calcium, or more calcium than milk. So the key thing you need to understand is that if you eat enough calories on a natural diet, you'll get enough calcium. So you don't have to worry about it. The third foundational myth on planet A is that human well-being necessitates endless economic growth. And it keeps getting drilled into our heads in schools and so on. This is why education is at the foundation of the transformation. We need to re-educate ourselves to understand the truth. Human well-being does not necessitate endless economic growth. Absolutely not. We need to meet all the goals like zero hunger, good health and well-being, no poverty, all the sustainable development goals. They're all good goals. We need to meet them as if we are doing an engineering project, that we are actually solving the problem. And there's one goal within the sustainable development goals called goal number 8, which is decent jobs and economic growth. And to me, that is a Trojan horse that has been put in place to make us think we are meeting all the goals by just growing the economy. We need to throw that Trojan horse out, goal number 8, and replace it with goal number 18 from the Beyond Cruelty Foundation, which is zero animal exploitation. Can we not start living without exploiting animals? If we do that, then we'll meet all the other goals easily. So I say, replace goal number 8 with goal number 18, zero animal exploitation, and then remove this necessity for endless economic growth. Because we are living on a finite planet. Have we not figured that out by now, when climate is changing like this? So the corresponding truth, foundational truth on planet B, is that human well-being necessitates a sense of purpose that's larger than ourselves. And finally, the fourth foundational myth on planet A, which I was witnessing them making this myth happen, is that fossil fuel burning is the leading cause of climate change. And it's a myth. In fact, when we burn fossil fuels today, we're not only emitting heating gases like carbon dioxide, we're also emitting cooling gases like sulfur dioxide. And those cooling gases have actually mitigated all the heating from fossil fuels. From 1750 to 2020, if you do the calculations, according to the UN IPCC's sixth assessment report, you will notice that the amount of heating caused by fossil fuels is almost canceled out by the amount of cooling that's done by fossil fuels. So even from the IPCC's data alone, fossil fuels have only caused 18% of the heating that we are experiencing today on the planet. Industry has caused 5%. Animal agriculture has caused 52% of the heating that we're experiencing on the planet. Then forestry is another 10%, other agriculture 8%, and so on. So you get to 100%. There's a paper by Jared Bishop that you can read up, and he's just interpreting and showing you exactly the data from the UN IPCC itself that's telling us this. So how is the IPCC able to tell us that fossil fuels are the leading cause of climate change? They do this by ignoring all the cooling emissions. You say, don't count that. Only count the heating emissions. This is like a child saying, don't look at my hand when I'm holding the cookie. See, there is no cookie here. This is how we are dealing with climate change that's causing us planet to die off. We have to start over and do it right. So the correct foundational truth on planet B, the fourth foundational truth on planet B, is that animal agriculture is the leading cause of climate change, while stopping fossil fuel use now is suicidal. Why is it suicidal? Because it will unmask the cooling immediately. If the world goes vegan today, then we can start dialing down the fossil fuel use tomorrow. But if the world is not vegan, don't even bother looking at that. Help, help us get the world to be vegan as quickly as possible, please. This is the role of all religions. This is the role that I would like to see all religions take up now, because it's about compassion for all creation in all our actions, knowing fully well that we do not have to exploit animals anymore for our survival. So this is a truth that we need to bring into our education system, and to every human being on the planet needs to know this, because it's urgent. Our planet is on fire. It's a 7-alarm fire right now. Okay, there's a 7-alarm fire going on, and all 7 of those alarms will get silenced if the world goes vegan. This is why it's urgent, and we all have to become firefighters on this planet. You know, when your home is on fire, would you say, and you know that your home is on fire, and you know that your sister is sitting in the next room, and she's unaware that the home is on fire, would you say, let her find out on her own? Or would you tell her? You will tell her, right? And when you tell her, she will help you put out the fire. This is exactly what's going on the planet. Our home is on fire. And there are lots of people who don't know why this fire is happening and how they are causing the fire themselves. We have to help them understand that as quickly as possible, and then they will come and help us put out the fire. This is why a vegan world by 2026 to me is an absolute necessity. And we have no choice but to make it happen. So let's figure out how to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rao, for once again enlightening us with this wisdom, this very open-hearted, compassionate approach to climate change. I always feel reinvigorated and re-inspired myself listening to you speak. So thank you very much for this keynote lecture. And the Q&A is filling up quickly with questions for you. So if it's okay with you now, I'd like to moderate a discussion between the Q&A. I'll kind of go through these questions here, see if we can get to all of them. We have about 20 minutes, and yeah, you can provide some answers. So the first question comes from Samyak Jain, and Samyak asks a really good question that comes up a lot within Jain communities that I think, especially in the diaspora, can sometimes be controversial about fake meat. So he says, Jai Janendra, God bless you all. Sailesh sir, do you think fake meat substitutes are not Jain, such as vegan chicken, vegan beef, etc.? My family says that because they imitate meat in the name and flavor, it goes against the vegetarian ethos of Jainism. What do you think?
Well, when I first went vegan, this was back in 2008, when I realized that consuming dairy I was an ethical lacto-vegetarian, okay? And I realized that as an ethical lacto-vegetarian, I was causing the most damage on the planet. In fact, it's worse than even eating meat. Okay? So that was my calculation. And when I did that, I decided I have to go vegan on the spot. Okay. So I went vegan on the spot. I had this sense of shame that I had been doing this for so long and not realizing it. And my first instinct was, how do I replace my foods? How do I replace the cow's milk curd with different types of yogurt? Okay. So I was substituting for what I was eating with other things that were similar. And everyone does that to begin with. If you're used to eating meat, if you're used to eating meat and you were told that that's the only way to eat, then your plate is going to be a center of meat with some side vegetables. And when you ask them to go vegan, they're going to want something that looks like that to begin with, at least. That's not the way I eat today. Okay, I don't hardly make yogurt anymore. I mean, I do make yogurt with peanuts, but I don't eat it every day like I used to. So my diet has changed. I've become more and more whole food plant-based. But to transition, I was looking for something that will substitute what I was eating. And this is common for all of us. This is why I say fake meat, or the meat, it's not really fake meat, it's meat, it's real. Meat to me is something that has nutritional value, and it's solid nutritional value, made out of plants. Whether you make it out of soybeans or chickpeas or whatever, if you eat the chickpeas directly, people are okay with it. But if I process the chickmeat into something that looks like a square, is it not okay? Why is that not okay? So I say that let people figure out how to transition. And eventually we will all come to the healthiest food, which is whole food plant-based eating. And this is what I mainly eat today. And because ultimately taking care of our health, taking care of our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health is what's going to make the planet healthy as well. We have to become healthy before our planet becomes healthy.
Yeah, thank you. And this question comes up a lot from the Jain community in particular. And I can say that we recently had an event about it where we had an entire talk about it in our Dialogues in European Jain Studies uh, speaker series. And so maybe if Diana can find that and drop the link into the chat, it was on Jainism and animals just last week. We talked about this exact question that you just answered, Dr. Rao. There's another question from Agni Hogabum, who's one of our wonderful graduate students in our master's program. They ask, or they say first, thank you, Dr. Rao. I appreciate your engineering perspective a great deal. In the age of consumer capitalism and a global democratic recession, how can we help the most marginalized people feel safe and emboldened to let go of one of the only forms of power that they can reliably access daily, that of eating animals? They are afraid of giving up any power as well as the appearance of dietary affluence, as they've had so much taken from them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. And I understand that it's the education is number one. So I have these 7 strategic initiatives that we work on at Climate Healers. The first is education, education, education. We have to talk to everyone around us. Let's go and have a conversation with people at marginalized communities and inform them that the animals they're eating are highly contaminated today. Okay? We did this, okay? And we have to take responsibility for it. The industrial civilization has been pouring 220 billion tons of chemicals into the environment every year. So that's about 30 tons per person per year. And those chemicals don't go away. They're there in the water. They're being absorbed by plants. They're in the tree trunks and branches throughout the world. And they're absorbed by plants, and the plants are trying to filter the chemicals out. And they store it in their trunks, and they try to transpire fresh water through their leaves, pure water through the leaves. And they try to bring pure water to make the fruit or the vegetable. So plants have this ability to filter those chemicals out. But then when we take the entire plant and feed it to our animals, they're going to get all those chemicals in the food they're eating. So if you look at the feed for our animals, they're being contaminated. In fact, chemical pollution is the number 2 reason for loss of biodiversity on the planet, right behind habitat loss. So the animals are sick. They're getting chemically contaminated. And if you're eating those animals now, you're going to get sick. It is no longer good food for people. It probably was used to sustain people in the cold climates of Europe and North America once upon a time. And food was scarce. So in those times, we had scarcity, and the scarcity-minded mindset is now being transmitted to the entire world, because in tropical countries, the food was abundant. I mean, there was plenty of plant foods available. So this is why we need to convince people at in the marginalized communities that we can supply to you healthy food. So it's our role to supply to them healthy food, and we'll give it to you for free. Please start eating it. So if you were to ask me, how would you implement this project? That's what I would do first. Healthy food freely available to every human being on the planet through every place of worship, every community, and every place of worship. If you make that happen, yeah, it's not so hard to make that happen, because today there are 800 million people going hungry, 9 million people dying of hunger-related causes, and yet 42 billion animals are being fed an adequate diet to raise them, to kill them. If we can feed 42 billion animals an adequate diet, can we not feed 8 billion human beings an adequate diet? Of course we can. We have the technology to do that. We have the engineering wherewithal to do that. So if we make that happen and then say, look, it's available for free, I'm not going to force you, because to me, this transformation is a transformation for love. And love comes with freedom. So we have to say, we'll give it to you for free and please eat it. And this is the why we are doing it.
Great. Yeah, our next question comes from Dinesh Jain. I'm going to try to take these in order of relevance because there are several questions. It says, quite an enlightening talk. Thank you for your promise to Kimaya, a very clear goal. Could you please give some facts and figures about people who have turned vegan so far in 2025? Also, can you please provide the plants foods that give protein and calcium so that people clearly know how to turn vegan or promote veganism?
Yeah, I don't have the figures for 2025. Statista has done a survey of over 180,000 people around the world. I think it was an online survey, and Statista had estimated 280 million people are vegan today on the planet. Now, I think Statista had overestimated the number of vegans in India, because I think India people tend to confuse veganism and vegetarianism in surveys. So I'm estimating around 200 million people are vegan. Okay, but I also say that there are two kinds of people on the planet: conscious vegans and closeted vegans. We are all vegan. We are all vegan at heart. Okay? Because if I ask anyone, would you deliberately hurt an innocent animal unnecessarily? Everyone says no. We are not practicing what we say because we have been falsely led to believe you need to eat animals in order to get protein. You need to drink milk in order to get calcium. So these myths of making otherwise compassionate people do things that they wouldn't do otherwise. Okay, so 90% of Americans think that protein is only found in meat and calcium is only found in milk. And 95% of Americans are not eating enough fiber in their diet. Now, if you had a government that really wanted to help people, wouldn't they know how to solve this problem? Of course we do. We are not solving the problem because we don't want to right now in the system on planet A. I want to implement a system on planet B where we are solving the problem. We actually are doing what we say we are going to do. And that will solve the problem. Okay. So again, I see this as a transformation that we have to effect. Did I answer the question, or did I go off on a tangent there?
No, I think you've done a good job and provided other information that we also need. So it was fine. That was great. Ayan asks, I'm going to read the first part of the question because there's multiple questions, but just in the interest of time, Ayan says, Dear Sailesh, what in your view could be the underlying reasons for the dissonance between what we advocate and the actions we actually follow? You've sort of spoke to that when you're answering that last question, but yeah.
Yeah, it's because we tend to want to align our actions and our thoughts, and we have values as well. We want to align our actions, thoughts, and knowledge or values. And when we are led to believe something that is not true, then we go against our own values. So this is why these foundational myths are so important, that we need to break those myths and we have to tell people the truth. Donella Meadows was one of the greatest systems scientists of our time, and she passed away recently. But she was one of the authors of the Limits to Growth report that came out of MIT in the 1970s. And so she had come up with these 12 ways in which you can change systems, 12 leverage points. And the two most powerful leverage points are the power to change paradigms, the power to change the system, the foundation of the system. Okay? And the second is the foundation of the system. What are the paradigms it's based on? The third is the goals of the system, and so on, right? So she has 12 of these. And they're in, so if you address the paradigms and you say the foundations are wrong, folks, you're believing something that's wrong. And this is why you're doing things that goes against your own values. Then you are able to transform people. That's the best way to transform people, because they then can come into alignment with who they really are. And so I say that this is the task before us today, you know, and within the next year, can we do this in Arihanta Institute?
We're changing hearts and minds one talk at a time, thanks to you and all the people who are here today. Thank you. Yes. Here's a question that comes, there's two related to this question, and it's with regard to the 52% of greenhouse gas emissions. So Shweta Jain asks, Dr. Rao, did you say that animal-based food is responsible for 52% of GHG emissions? This is quite alarming. My understanding was that the number was much lower. Would you share the resources and literature backing 52%?
Yeah, the 52% is a paper by Jared Bishop. Let me find the link and put it on the chat.
Yeah,
And sorry,
Deanna might be able to find it for you. Yeah.
Okay. It's by Jared Bishop, and Bishop is Bishop. So two S's there. And that is actually based on the IPCC's own data. You don't have to go anywhere. Okay. Their own data is saying that. And it's by looking at what has happened from 1750 to 2020. So it's by looking at how much CO2 has increased and what the increase in CO2 has caused in terms of warming, and dividing that among the different sectors. Okay, so that's what Jared Bishop did. So CO2 was one gas, and then methane is another gas. There are 11 different emission species that you have to count. So cumulatively, what Jared Bishop is saying is that cumulatively, between 1750 and 2020, animal agriculture has caused 52% of the heating that you're experiencing. Now, I wrote a paper back in 2019, which got published in 2021, saying that animal agriculture is responsible for at least 87% of greenhouse gas emissions on an annual basis. And how did I come up with that? I had 31% on an annual basis of actual emissions, 31% of greenhouse gas emissions on an annual basis, plus 56% was the opportunity cost. And that opportunity cost was calculated saying that if you didn't have animal agriculture, all this land will get freed up. And then I was counting how much CO2 would be sequestered on that land this year if you were allowing that land to become forest again. That is an opportunity cost. Because when you're consuming animals, we are saying, I don't want that forest to come back. I'd rather eat this meat instead, right? So you're making a decision based on the healing that could have been happening. So that 56% was calculated by counting how much CO2 was stored in the food that the animals are eating today. Our animals are eating almost 5 times as much food as we eat today. So we're actually extracting 6 times as much food as we need from the planet. Most of it is being fed to our animals. And we are starving 800 million people, and 9 million people are dying of hunger and hunger-related causes. So that's the kind of food system we have created. It's a mess. And this is why I'm looking forward to the Compassionate Food System course that I'll be teaching at the Arihanta Institute later this year. So It's that, just going through the calculations on an annual basis is 31% is my calculation of actual emissions plus 56% of opportunity cost. So that's at least 87%. And I'm able to update that 56% to 87% based on the sixth assessment report, because the original paper I wrote was with the fifth assessment report of the UN. Sixth assessment report has increased the soil carbon, and therefore I'm able to increase that to 118%, which literally means that if the world goes vegan today, we should see the planet cool a little bit every year. So it's more than 100%, even though you're still burning fossil fuels for transportation and so on.
Well,
That's my engineering estimate. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very promising promise, let's say, or finding of yours. And one of the things that I appreciate about your research, I've cited it in my own courses, some of the stuff that you've gone over here. And I know you're going to go over it as well in your course that is going to be released later this year. I really want to thank you, Dr. Rao, for being our keynote speaker today. I'm getting messages on my phone. I'm getting messages in the chat. I'm getting messages in the Q&A of how much people really appreciate the message that you've delivered today in such an open-hearted and compassionate way. So we really want to thank you and call the audience to really listen to you and to go out and make this work happen. So thank you very much.